government has been always the one who has come up with the idea and then written the language and then gone to the states and said, this is a good thing, we should ratify it. So the states have lost, I think, a great opportunity here to start changing the way things are happening in Washington.
Now, that is starting to happen. The 10th Amendment movement is taking root. Arizona is a prime example of that. The law they passed against the illegal immigrants, allowing police to enforce that law, is
Certainly.
a step. And Texas is moving in the same direction.
Exactly. And but what I'm suggesting is, for example, since the 1970s, probably even before the 1970s, there have been people that have been trying to pass a balanced budget amendment to try to rein in Washington, try to tie their hands. There's a wonderful Jefferson quote, Thomas Jefferson quote, that says that there's two enemies of the people, criminals and government. And we need to use the chains of the Constitution to bind the second so it will not become the legalized version of the first. In other words, we have to use the Constitution to restrain government so they don't become criminals. And I think a lot of our government officials, you could probably put the label of criminal on those people. People like, Charlie Rangel, who has about 11 violations against him, both where he's broken laws as well as broken ethics violations that he had agreed not to break by being a representative. So what I am suggesting, the way that average people and the way that average states within our union can take back our federal government is by passing constitutional amendments outside of the federal government. In other words, without any federal government involvement, and especially without any federal government impediments. And the first and foremost one that I list in my book, I actually list 15 different possible constitutional amendments, and the first one is a balanced federal budget where federal spending will never exceed 18% of GDP, gross domestic product. And one of the things I've now started to do, about roughly 2 weeks ago, I met with Governor Jan Brewer here in Arizona, and I spoke with her directly and said that I wanted to get a letter from her stating that the state of Arizona would be willing to participate in the calling for a constitutional convention with the sole purpose of passing a balanced budget amendment. In 1994, the Republicans won the House during the Republican Revolution. And one of their and part of the reason that they did so well that year was they had what was called the Contract with America, and the number one item on the Contract with America was a balanced budget amendment. Well, they had the majority in Congress over the next 6 years while Clinton was president, and then they had it during the next 6 years while Bush was president. So now we have a Republican-controlled Congress, a Republican president in the White House, and yet we still don't have our balanced budget amendment. So what I say in my book is that we cannot trust either party in power to, for example, to pass a constitutional balanced budget amendment. It's just not going to happen. They don't want to tie their own hands. So the only way the American people can ever have that kind of fiscal control over the federal government is if we do it ourselves and we do it at the state level.
Now, Arizona does have an initiative program. If you could kind of condense that and put it in an initiative form,
Well, if we pass something at the matter of fact, I believe that the state of Arizona has a balanced budget amendment or balanced budget requirement at the state level. But what I'm talking about is a balanced budget requirement at the federal level to tie the hands of the federal government and basically say you cannot borrow more or you cannot borrow money, you cannot spend more than you take in taxes. And so what would have to happen is we would need 2/3 of the states would need to call for a constitutional convention. We can do that without any federal involvement, and then I believe it's 3/4 of the states would then have to ratify any constitutional amendments that we chose to try to ratify in a constitutional convention. This can all happen at the state level without any federal involvement.
I think that's probably a good plan, although we've always kind of shied away from doing a constitutional convention because we thought that would do more harm than good.
You know, how much harm?
How much more?
Everyone has to be concerned about messing around with the Constitution. The problem, of course, is that the folks in Washington have figured out how to play the game. You have people in there like Barney Frank that's been he's been in Washington for 40 years as a politician. Libyan dictator Gaddafi has only been a dictator for 41 years.